to sing, but I come to hum. Good evening, my name is William Garrett. I was born in 1949 to a loving and caring and sharing parents. My father, Bishop William Garrett Sr., and my mother, missionary Lily Mae Garrett. Upon my parents getting married, after my father got out of the Navy, they chose to come to California. You see, they grew up in a time in which stigma and discrimination and racism was at its highest peak. So upon coming to California, my father got a job at the Naval Air Station. My mother, 4 years after that, got a job at the Naval Supply. Now understand that black people in those days getting a job for the government was like a doctor getting $1 million contract to work at UC Stanford. Upon my arrival, my parents taught me to use universal principles from birth. They taught me how to share with people, care for people, those that are less fortunate. I remember my father, a friend of his, came from Texas. He didn't have a job. He also came out to service. He brought his wife and 5 kids. And because of my father and mother being blessed to have government jobs, they took care of that man and his family for 3 years. About 3 months after their arrival, my father talked to my mother and talked her into allowing him to give up one of the cars because we were blessed to have 2 cars at that time. So therefore he gave the car, and the man was not educated, so after my father got off of work in the evening, he would go to his house and tour it. Well, that man acquired a city job after that completion. My mother and father once took me to Oklahoma, where they grew up at. And this was the first time that I was being able to recognize discrimination and racism. So we were going down the turnpike, and my mother said, "William, it's time to eat, let's stop at this restaurant." At that particular time, I didn't have any knowledge of what an outhouse was. But there was an outhouse outside, and it said Negroes only. Where in the side of the restaurant, in the restroom, it said outside, whites only. So I had to ask my mother, why is that? Now, I'm talking about 8, 9 years old at this particular time. And she said, "Son, in due time, you will understand, but this is not the time." Well, as you can see that my parents are some loving and giving parents, and when the streets that I grew up on, it was like maybe 30 families, but maybe 7 families had their own mother and father had good jobs. So my mother and father was constantly helping those that were less fortunate. When she went shopping, she would buy more food than what was needed for the house in order to help those that were less fortunate. Matter of fact, the family in which they took in from Texas, for 3 years, my parents supplied food for their household. You see, we believed in giving to be blessed. But the principle says it is better to give than to receive, but as you give, so shall you receive. So them principles work for my parents. Now, there's 3 parts of this story. I talked about the upbringing. Now we're talking about the trauma. Because you see, I was taught to give. But at the same time, when you're coming up in your peers at that particular time, they didn't just steal to steal or rob to rob or take to take. They did it because of the mere fact that they was trying to help their mother raise. They helped their mother raise their sisters and brothers. Instead of me letting them know that if they needed something, they could come and tell me, and I could tell my parents, and they would assist them in helping them get what they need. I followed the road of following them with the stealing. That led to me smoking weed, which ultimately led me to shooting heroin and smoking crack. Therefore, I went to the county juvenile hall, county camps, went to YA twice, state penitentiary 3 times, federal penitentiary twice. But you know, for everything that's bad, there's a good side. And this particular story is the best part of my story. It's my recovery. For I was blessed 14 years ago to meet my pastor, the executive director of Hero House Community Service, which at that particular time was the first mentally and physically disabled consumer establishment that took care and took the homeless consumers that was mentally and physically disabled off the streets, fed them, clothed them, etc. Now mind you, at this particular time, I'm in my addiction. So the first 8 years, I took my pastor to what I consider purity hell. But you see, my higher power lets me know that in spite of what I do wrong, he loves me. So in spite of what I did, my pastor was consistent in coming to get me off the streets over this particular time 5 years ago. I came to him and I said, I'm tired of being tired. Can I come home? And when he took me back in is when I really seen what he was doing. You see, what he was doing is going into the community, pulling those that had mental and dual diagnosed problems off the streets, cleaning them up, and teaching them universal principles to where they can fend for themselves, because it's an independent establishment. He introduced me to Healthy Oakland, which is the only faith-based program in California. It's a clinic. Upon me doing that, I started getting involved with the mental health. I had 9 individuals that was in the one house, and it was only me. They were bipolar and dual diagnosed. They taught me well. But what I like about it is today, 5 years later, he has made me the Hero House Community Services medical coordinator. When I take it, y'all need to be trying no louder than that. Because it's a blessing for a person to come from the pit of hell to be able to establish themselves and reach out and touch somebody that needs to be touched. In my closing, there are 2 people in which I want to talk about just a brief moment. One of them is Frederick Douglass, and then last but not least is my father. Frederick Douglass said, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I say to you, it takes a nation to raise a village. In my final closing, I'd like for you to repeat after me. Once a task has begun. Never leave it till it's done. Be the labor, great or small. Do it well, or not at all. God bless you.